Good afternoon from the UK and good morning, America, as the saying goes.
Yeah,
I'm delighted to be joined by sci-fi writer Eric Goebelbecker from sunny. Is it sunny in America at nine
pretty sunny
o'clock in
right
the
now.
morning?
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
nice. It's actually for a change. It's really nice here. Uh, it varies from day to day, but yes, it's really nice today. So we'll start at the very beginning, as they say in The Sound of Music. How did you come to write, and can you remember the first thing you wrote?
The first, I wanted to be a writer going back to high school, which was a very, very long time ago.
Right.
The first thing I remember writing was, or the first things was a collection of short stories in high school. They were
Mhm.
also sci-fi, and one of them, oddly, I think nowadays we'd call YA,
Okay.
young adult,
Mm.
and they were I mean, my father was into science fiction. I read a lot of Marvel comics when I was a kid. I created some superhero characters, stuff like that.
Wow.
Those short stories were for an English class and were
Mm.
very sci-fi focused. A couple of them were actually based on the band Genesis, lyrics for
Oh
Genesis
yes.
songs.
Yeah, love
Trick of the
Genesis.
Tail is the one I really remember, which actually now my little LLC for publishing is Trick of the Tail LLC.
Oh,
So still
nice.
a Genesis fan.
Nice. Me
Uh,
too.
and um, I kind of lost that when I joined the Army. And really, I still wrote, but most of it until very recently was the technical documentation. My current day job is actually writing content and strategy for technical websites content. I
Mhm.
sort of retired from programming.
Right.
And at a certain point, decided I wanted to write about my grandfather, who had a very interesting life.
Mm.
Got into that, did a lot of research, and realized this is not the first book for me to write. And that sort
Right.
of morphed into a science fiction story.
Mm.
Uh, and I have some other ideas beyond this. I'm writing the second book in what will probably be a 3 book series. And then I already have ideas are easy. I have a million ideas. It's just turning them into something real.
Yeah.
That's the hard
Yeah.
part.
And do you still write short stories? I am biased because short story is my favorite format, but could some of those, do you think, we say have shorter legs and be a short story rather than a novel, do you
I
think?
If you join my email list, not an advertisement, just an
Mhm.
explanation,
Yeah, no, no.
you
Advertise
get it.
away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Advertise as much as you like.
I have a short story in the same universe as this science fiction story that you get for signing up for my newsletter.
Right.
I have a terrible, terrible version of a slightly longer story that I want to rewrite and make a better, in my opinion, giveaway for the story.
Hmm.
I've thought about short stories. There's definitely, again, ideas are easy ideas in there. I
Hmm.
still want to dig up that Genesis one. I don't have a copy of
Mm.
it, but redo that.
Mm.
But I'm very much focused on getting that second book out.
Okay.
But that's certainly something I would think about
Mhm.
now that I've learned a bit about story structure and so forth. I can look at
Mm.
my older short stories and see how to fix them and so forth.
Mm. Mm.
So that's definitely something that would happen.
Okay. See, science fiction, my husband reads avidly science fiction. I'll have to point him in your direction. And but he has a science brain. I'm very much into the arts. So it must help certainly having that growing up with the connection to science fiction is why you chose that genre. I suppose it's natural to you.
Yes, I mean, yeah. So I in the Army, I repaired radars, worked with technology, and I got away with being a self-taught programmer on Wall Street because when I got back to the
Right.
States in the 1990, you
Mm.
get a job as a programmer without a degree.
Okay.
That helps. But I have
Mm.
to say, what attracts me to science fiction is the way the best science fiction is social commentary.
Right.
And if you look at some of the real um, I'm going to call it icons in the science fiction field, and some of the most
Mm.
famous stories like 1984 and Fahrenheit
Oh well.
451,
Yeah. Right.
they're about social commentary. When you ask somebody what's Fahrenheit 451 about, it's like, well,
Mm.
people burn books.
Right.
And you could take that story and you could set it in medieval times and it would
Mm.
still work. You could take 1984, and once you fix the whole surveillance problem,
Mm,
turn it into spies or something. You could put it in medieval times. You could put
mm,
it in Victorian England. You could put it in 1910s
mm,
United States.
mm,
And that's what I really like is if it's about the technology first, it becomes a lot of the stuff you see on TV.
yeah.
um, you know,
Almost a handbook, I suppose.
right, right. But I mean, like I don't want to start denigrating franchises, but there are certain science fiction fantasy things that are about the stuff and about the toys and
Mm,
less people.
the people. Yeah.
So, I throw in like right now the second book I'm working on right now, I'm throwing in
Mm,
references to specific weapons and specific things because I know fans want that,
yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
not what it's about.
Yeah. Well, it's finding the balance, isn't it, between not giving enough information, so pleasing the people who aren't techies and
Hmm.
those who want to know, for instance, in crime, how many milliseconds it takes the trajectory of a bullet from a
Yeah.
22 caliber gun to go
Right.
from one side of the room and how deep it penetrates the wall when it's not
Yeah.
everybody wants to know that. And it
Right.
slows everything down. You don't want it to be a slow read. You want it to
Exactly.
everything. And I totally agree about the characters because when you've got character setting plot, yes, you want an interesting setting. Yes, it's got to be a relatively riveting plot, but it's all about the character. If you don't, because I
Yes.
have read, I didn't actually tell her, and I don't suppose she'll ever watch this, but I read a Katie Ford book where I didn't really care too much about the main character because she was a bit of a wimp, and then she goes to what it's based in a book festival, which is probably what drew it to me in the first place. And she goes to Ireland to get a reclusive author to join the book festival, and so she gets a backbone. She gets this guy back to England and then loses her backbone again. Whereas the her best friend has the backbone all the way through the story. And I was a local author group, and Katie Ford was our competition judge one year. And I said to her, would she make this? Monica was the side. I can't even remember the name of the main character. So Monica was the sidekick. Would she ever write a story with her as the main character? And she said, I should. I've really thought about that. And I didn't like to say well because the other one didn't have a backbone. But yeah, it is. It really is, isn't it?
Right.
If you care about the character and what happens to them, that is
Right.
the crux of the story. Because you want them
Exactly.
to be all right by the end of it and solve the problem.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm actually redoing some chapters right now because I thought my character needed some more. He had plenty of backbone. I think he needed a little bit less. Yeah.
Mm. Okay. So do you how do you edit? Do you write a first draft and then leave it for a while and come back to it and send it off
I
to beta readers and
I haven't had the luxury of time because I give myself aggressive schedules. Otherwise, I will wait. And probably too old for an all-nighter person, but that's how
right.
my brain works.
Hmm.
So I the first book was a lot of agonizing chapter by chapter. This second book, I mean, I've written other books that will never see the light of day. This second book for publication, I'm very much writing a draft pell-mell straight through. And maybe I go back, like last night, I was actually driving to martial arts school and it hit me what was missing. And I went back actually late last night
Right.
and made some
Okay.
surgical edits.
Okay.
Um, then I will do another pass through. Hopefully I'll take a week or two off.
Mm.
That's about as long as I would step away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Go through again. And then I have a professional editor that I used for the first book that within days of finishing that second book, I reserved her time. And that's actually
Right.
one of the reasons why I have a deadline is the good editor's
Okay.
busy. And she told me she had time in November. And I'm like,
Right.
how much?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Just take my money.
Yeah.
Um,
Because
and
that's the
that's very
thing.
much,
If it's the same with me, if I'm a guest somewhere, or I've got to send some information to somebody, and they say, oh, and I say, oh, when do you need it by? Oh, whenever you like. And then a year later, they might pop up on email. Are you still interested in doing such and such? And it's
yeah,
the old Douglas Adams. deadlines are great as you hear them whoosh by.
Yeah.
If I'm given a deadline, then I'm pretty good. I've
Mhm.
only ever
Yeah.
been out of about 350 books. I've only been one day late once, and I can't even remember what happened now. But yeah, I think it needed more work
Yep.
than expected or something. So
And I sent the first book out to beta readers and didn't get much feedback back. So I think I'm
okay.
going to do that again this time, but I'm not
Mm,
counting on it. I'm counting on the editor, a
mm,
couple friends, and I what I did for that first book, I may do it again. Is pay a proofreader, just have somebody go
right.
through it quickly because
Yeah.
it's like typos and stuff are viruses. They reproduce when you're not
Yeah.
looking.
And they are everywhere. I was
Yeah.
saying to a guest that readers are sometimes amazed when they find one typo in a traditionally published book,
Hmm.
and you can go through it hundreds of times, well, not
Yep.
literally, but and always
Yep.
find something, and always find something to change. Because when I edit, I do two sweeps, and I have a Kindle Fire, so it has text to speech, so it reads it out to me. So I'll do that twice, and then I'll send it back, and then the author will go through it, and then it comes back to me, and I'll go through it twice again, and then it goes back to the author, and then if they want me to go through it again, I'll go through it again, and I go through it again twice, and I'm forever finding things.
Yep. Yeah. It's
And
true.
it usually tweaks rather than errors, but you just think, well, actually, you could do that. And I'm sure having various people, their opinion, even if the beta readers don't find anything wrong with it, or they might say, well, yes, I like it, which isn't terribly helpful. They might
Yeah.
say, oh, but
Exactly.
but I would have preferred if you'd done such and such, or if it's a dog instead of a cat, or something like that.
Yeah.
So what about your covers? You got fabulous covers.
Oh, that's a company called I don't know how to pronounce it. MIBL Art,
Oh,
Mibble
Mibble
Art.
art. Mibble
Yes.
art. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I think
and
they were sorry, Karen.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think there's a company in Ukraine called Get Covers, and I'm a student of Brian Cohen's Amazon Advertising or
Oh,
author advertising school, and they don't usually recommend anybody for any particular service, but they recommend Get Covers, and I think Mibble Art is part of Get Covers, the
oh,
umbrella
okay.
of Get Covers, and highly rated, really highly rated.
I'm blown away.
Mm.
I found them with a friend from high school who's also a self-published author,
Mhm.
and I found out about one of his books, bought it, loved the cover. Another science fiction author, and he told me it was them. I went to them, and
Mm.
the first cover, it was two passes. The second cover, they nailed it in one.
Mm.
And I went to them, partly because they're also very reasonable, I have to say.
Mm.
There actually is another cover for my first book I didn't use
Right.
that I paid nearly three times as much for, an independent
Mm.
artist.
Mm.
And after like four passes with him, I'm like, fine, and I took it. And
Yeah.
it was very dark and murky, so I'm
Right.
really, really, really pleased with them. And I know
Mm.
they're not using AI because they do provide you the PSD file when they're
Right.
done. And I was able to see how it's assembled from clip art, which is what a
Yeah, all the
digital artist
layers and
would
things.
take.
Yeah.
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 Because
Yeah.
I mean, AI, I could see it a million miles away. And I'm in a bunch of Facebook groups for fantasy and science fiction, and I see these
Mm.
just so obvious AI covers
Yeah.
that
And there will be there's a check when you upload, you'll know this, when you upload your document and your covers and so on, decide what you're going to call it and so on. There is a did you use AI checkbox, and
yep,
I've avoided using AI. And there are court cases coming up, so I think because you never know exactly where the source comes from,
yep,
and so you have to know that every step of the way there's accountability for
yep,
everything you do. Yeah.
yeah.
So you mentioned about being in the army. Have you tempted to filter that into any of your books?
Well, both of these first two books have main characters that are in the military. They're in the German military, but
Okay.
they are. But that has just as much to do with my grandfather as it does with me.
Right.
I don't want to derail to go into him, but one of his pinnacle, not pinnacle, one important experiences is he was at the Somme on
Right.
the side of the Germans.
Mm,
And at the only point where the British made it through on the first day at Mehmet's Woods.
right.
And and so what happened is I wanted to write about that. And like I said, it was just I assembled an amazing amount of information about him. I
Mm,
really didn't think I would, which
mm.
and by the way, libraries. I actually found the yearbook for his unit in the German army in the New York Public Library.
Wow.
They had it in the research section.
Wow, that's
Uh,
amazing.
and that what came out of that was I came up with a science fiction idea that starts on the Somme.
Mm,
Um, but I have to say, I don't look back. I don't regret being in the military, but it's not something I look back to often. You know,
no.
missing the
Right.
good old days. I think I enjoyed
No.
living in Germany more than I enjoyed being in
Yeah.
the army.
Yeah.
Uh, but it does filter in. That said, military sci-fi is one of those genres that many books end up being about the toys. There has to be
Yes.
armor, there has to be laser
Yeah.
guns, there has
Yeah.
to be a model number.
Yeah.
And some of that's fun, but I
Mm,
wouldn't want to read like more than two of those books a year.
no. I think some books are written in the hope that it's going to be picked up to be a movie.
Yeah,
So if it's got all the bells and whistles,
yeah,
then Spielberg can just pick it up and run with
right.
it. Get
Yeah,
a script writer and run with it.
yeah.
Do you have a set schedule? I know we're talking about deadlines. Do you write at a certain time? If you write quite late, did you say?
No, that was a very rare. So
Okay,
lately, just the past 2 weeks, actually, I've gotten more written in the past 2 weeks than I have in a couple of months.
right.
I joined a mastermind group, and the first call is 9 a.m. Eastern time until
Okay.
10:30.
Hmm.
And I'll usually get a good 1,500 words done in that hour and a half. And I don't
Right.
know why having other people on a Zoom lens makes me want to work.
Yep.
I'm very much the writer that, if I didn't see anybody other than my wife all day, good
Yeah.
day.
That's yeah.
Uh,
They are the same.
um,
My husband and
and
my dog.
right, exactly. And my
Yeah.
dog, even though she annoyed the heck out of me
Yeah.
this morning, yeah, my dog.
Okay.
And then I will try to write again in the afternoon, depending on how the day job goes. So my day job is also Zoom based. I work for a company that has no
Right.
office.
Mm.
There's days where there is such a thing as an emergency blog post,
Okay.
and there are days where I can just go back and maybe get another few hundred words done.
Mm.
That's it. I will say, and I actually had this thought today walking the dog for aspiring writers. It's easy to not treat it like a job. You need to treat
Yeah.
it like a job.
Yeah. I don't. I'm terrible. I'm not
Yeah.
as well. It sounds too big-headed to say I'm not an aspiring writer because I have written, but
Mhm.
I don't treat it as a 9 to 5. My yes, no. Um, yes, I find things just do happen to sort of. I shouldn't really say this, that creep up and life gets in
Well,
the way.
I mean, and it happens. And I mean,
Yeah.
September,
Yeah.
I'm gonna hand off the book to the editor. I forgot what the deadline is. I think it's early October.
Right.
I have a bike. I'm a cyclist too. I have a long cycle trip scheduled for early
Mm,
September. I'm sure
mm,
I'll go days without writing, but
mm.
and I shouldn't, and it's bad. And it's it's kind of like being self-employed, but without a storefront. Like if you're self-employed and you own a
Yes.
cafe, you got to go unlock the door at 9 o'clock, and you
Yeah.
gotta mop the
Yeah.
floor at 4:30 and close and go
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. It shouldn't be
When,
any
when you're
different, should it?
right, when you're a writer, you can let as Douglas Adams. I mean, there you go. One
Yeah.
of the amazingly prolific, famous writers,
Yeah.
authors we've had made fun
Mm,
of deadlines. I think Vonnegut did too.
yeah.
But you have to, I think it's good to find a routine and treat it at like you have a job, and if you don't write 5,000 words a week, you're not going to
Mm,
get paid. Pretend
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That's what I've been doing lately, and it's worked for me. But it'll
Yeah.
wear off. I mean, the dog will get sick, or
Right.
or whatever. An interesting bike
Right.
ride in the Catskills will come up, or something
Yeah.
like that. That's
Yeah.
exactly what happened Sunday, actually.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think finding a routine. That said, and Chuck Wendig, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a horror sci-fi author.
Okay.
If you Google Terrible Minds, that's his blog.
Right.
He he has a book about writing with writing advice. And
Mm.
he also, and in that book, he makes fun of writing advice.
Okay.
And I think a
That
lot of
sounds like my
internet,
kind of book.
well, he's very funny.
Yeah.
He's hilarious.
Mm.
But, internet culture has this idea of, well, if Steve Jobs got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, then I have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Mm.
And if Stephen King uses a Smith Corona 1929, whatever the heck, then that's what I need to
Mm.
write. And as
Yeah.
he says in very colorful languages, that's all BS.
Yeah.
What works for you is what works for you.
Yeah.
So you might be the kind of person who could just write on Sunday and do 15,000 words. I don't believe you, but you
Mm.
might be able to do that. So figure out what works for you, but
Yes.
and figure out, you talked about balance before, that balance between holding yourself accountable but not making it drudgery.
Yes. No, exactly. Once it stops being fun,
Right.
then yeah.
Yeah.
So if say you had an hour in a day, could you write then? I suppose if because my trouble is I have such long gaps in between writing that I have to go back so far in order to carry on going. Whereas if you're writing pretty much every day, you still know where you're at and where you're
Yeah.
going next. Do you plot at all? Are
I
you a
plot.
plotter or
Yes. Yes.
yeah? I think that
I'm
helps.
a plancer. It's funny. My sister is also a published novelist, and I'm finding out more and more as I talk to her how much we're alike.
Yeah. Do you want a
Um,
quick plug for her books? Is she a same surname?
oh no, actually, Amy
Okay.
Clipston, romance,
Okay.
Amish romance is
Okay.
her, but she's doing the transition over to more traditional romance right now.
Okay.
She's got
Well,
like 3 million
if
sold.
she'd like to chat, send her here in my direction.
I could ask her and see
More
if
than
she has
happy.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I know
More than
she
happy.
she was under a pretty serious deadline last time we spoke,
Okay.
but
No,
I
that's all
can
right.
talk to her. No,
These
but I
are
will.
ongoing, so there's
Yeah,
no hurry.
yeah,
You'll
yeah.
never
No,
see each other.
I um I so what I do is, and I just started using a tool called Plotter, Plotter, no E,
Hmm.
which is the index card, really the index card functionality in Scrivener taken out of
Oh, yes.
Scrivener. I
Okay.
don't like Scrivener. I really
Yeah.
dislike Scrivener. As a programmer, I could go on for hours.
Yeah.
So it allows you to make that graphical timeline.
Okay.
And what I really liked about it is, I had worked with a coach at one point who got me into Save the Cat.
Mm.
It has a template for Save the Cat, and you can fill in the dots on Save the Cat. But it also has the 7 story beats. It has there's all
Yeah.
kinds. They're all
That
the
sounds good.
same. Yeah, they're all a variation on Joseph Campbell,
Yeah.
which is kind of overplayed. So you can fill in the dots, and then what I like is then you can have it spit out a Word doc with your
Mm.
chapters laid out, and you can just go in and write over your notes.
Okay.
But what'll happen is, and I think this is a byproduct of what you said, by working every day,
Mm.
the voice in my head right now is my book, because we all have voices in
Mm.
our head, just undiagnosed. Um, and that's what happened is, on my way to the dojo, I realized
Mm.
that my main character, oh, he would do this next. And I was sitting in the car talking into my phone, making notes uh, for that. And I think that's a good byproduct of working every day, is even if it's only 200 words,
Mm.
you touched it. You're keeping
Yeah.
it alive. It's
Yeah.
like a plant, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't prune the
Oh,
plant every day.
I kill
You,
plants.
oh no, yeah,
I'm terrible.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
terrible. I said buy me although I do prefer to be bought plants because they do
Mhm.
last a bit longer than flowers.
Right.
Because I think it's always sad when flowers die.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kill plants.
Hemingway said, here he goes, writer advice again. Hemingway once said he would stop in the middle of a sentence.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I try to do something similar to that. So even if I finish a chapter and I'm done, I'm drained, I need to go to sleep or
Mm,
watch TV or walk the
mm,
dog or
mm.
punch somebody or whatever, martial arts, um,
Okay.
I will still go and like start to flesh out the next chapter.
Mm,
Right, I had a chapter where something really bad happened that I finished that last night, and then this morning is kind of the aftermath. I'm like, okay, what's the first thing that they would say the next day? And I
right.
kind of map that out, and I may throw that away. I may go, God,
Yeah.
Eric, that was dumb.
Yeah.
But like you said, I think a lot of the reason why authors will walk away and not come back for a couple of days is that
Mm,
decision fatigue. of
Mm.
I don't know what to do next.
Yeah.
And
So
there's two levels of that. What's going to happen next? But also, what's the right word? How do I describe the fact that it's kind of cloudy right now? Do I talk about the
yeah,
clouds? Do I talk about the blue?
yeah,
Do I talk about the birds?
yeah,
You know,
yeah. So you work on one project at once, because I'm quite
yeah.
lucky well, lucky. It's my choice, but I work on at least one thing so that if I get stuck on one, I can just go to the other and carry on going. But you prefer to work on one at a time.
I prefer to work on one because I have stuff going on at the day job that I need
Yeah,
to worry about. So
yeah.
that's what I'll do is I will sometimes at night go back and work on day job stuff and that's
Mm.
good enough to get me away to worry about this
Right.
website's
Because it's
keywords
still
or
writing, isn't it?
right. Yes.
You're still doing a different form of writing.
Yep.
So brilliant. So for you, what's the best thing and the worst thing, if there is one, about writing? About writing fiction for you?
What's something clever in the document that you sent about this?
Okay.
There you go. Okay. The best thing is creating is that I can make up my world. Like I said, I
Mm.
my books are actually sequels to War of the Worlds, but
Mhm.
I can still make up what happened next. Um, and again, and I can use that in service of a story point I want to make. My first book, I don't know if people got it, but was very political.
Mm.
I actually started working on the story idea while Trump was running for president the first time, and I was worried that he would, after he lost, people would
Mm.
forget about it,
Right.
if only.
Mm.
Um, the second book is more of a philosophical idea. So, and what's nice is I can manipulate
Mm.
my world to make my point.
Yeah.
The worst thing is that I'm creating things. It's also the worst thing
Right.
because it's on me to decide what the right and wrong decisions are.
Okay.
And what I find interesting is, again, I've written probably a couple million words of nonfiction, technological oriented type stuff. I wrote test
Mm.
procedures in the Army up to programming and documentation.
Mm.
And that's easy because there's a million ways to say things, but there's only one right way. If I'm describing how a program works, that's how the program works. I have
Sure.
rails.
Sure.
In
And
fiction,
it
you have
has
no
to be
rails.
factual. It has to be
Right.
factual, presumably. Yeah. And
Right.
correct. Yeah.
In fiction, I don't have that constraint. And like
Mm.
what's interesting is I there's a review for my first book. And it's a 4-star review, which is,
Mm.
I'm
Nice.
averaging like 4.5 stars or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reviewer criticized me for having technology existing in my world that didn't exist in the real world.
Of course.
Right, but the book is science fiction,
Yes.
and what's funny is while and I'm like, thanked her, fine, whatever, it's
Yeah.
fine, but it just illustrates the point that what you said
Mm.
before, that character didn't have any spine.
Well,
You know, you're always going to be criticized, and you have to be ready for that. And I think that
yeah.
does make it hard. Is when you're God, sometimes that's not an easy job.
No. Well, one of my books, it was Serial Data, which is up there. I had the first. I don't read my reviews, so there are probably other 1-star reviews. But the first 1-star review I had for it, and that was traditionally published at the time. Um, she said, "I don't normally leave reviews for books, but this one was so bad I felt I had to." Which
It
I
shouldn't last.
actually found hilarious. And
Yeah.
I read it just before I went to bed, did not lose a wink of sleep.
Mhm.
The same book ended up being, and you know how many books bloggers read, ended up being a blogger's favorite book of the year. So go
Yeah.
figure.
I'm waiting for my first 1-star. I haven't gotten it yet. I mean, the
Okay.
only the only thing I care about for the average is the one promotion thing I want to use. You have to have a 4-star average. That's the only thing I care about is that the
Right.
average being high enough to use that
Yeah.
promoter.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't care.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of waiting, like, I want people to react.
Yeah. Well, we
You
write
know,
to be read, don't we, as
right, right,
writers?
yeah, yeah.
We want to know that even if we end up giving our book away, that
Hmm.
people are reading it and getting some entertainment and
Yep,
enjoyment from it.
yep,
Um, Otherwise, what's the point in we may as well just read it and shove it in a drawer.
right.
So there we go. Anyway,
Okay.
It's been a real pleasure chatting with you
Yep.
today, Eric. Thank you
Okay.
so much for joining me. And
Yep.
hopefully we'll be back to talk about your first book. And then by then, we'll have more from you and have more chats with you. So thank
Great.
you so
It
much.
was great. I
Thank.
appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.